Ross Graham from Streetwise Innovation. Probably a question to Royce. Nothing was mentioned about conveying people transportation from the city to the Homemaker Centre and back to incorporate that in a greater way. I'm not suggesting a monorail, but some sort of transportation.
You're looking at a bus service perhaps that links the two. Yeah. Look, it's not something that I'd be competent to really comment on, but I know that there is currently through Cradle Post Authority a study being done on the whole bus service link right along the coast, and I'd be pretty confident from what I'm aware of that that'll certainly be an important part of that. So yeah, I could understand the need for that, and I think we've been very mindful of the need to be able to provide that opportunity for people to be able to easily get in and out of the new living city.
Thanks, Ross. Phoenix Coaches already run a service up to the Harvey Norman Centre, and if you notice on the display there, our buses are really in the centre of the city, and that has been done on purpose, so it's easy to access and to get out of the city centre. Plus, what you've asked has actually come up during the consultation period, and Council is looking through that as well to enhance that service.
George Lee. I don't quite know which one to direct the question to. Probably the Mayor or Mr Atkins. One of my concerns is that the two ships don't seem to feature as much as they should. I am wondering what place is thought of. Is there any place that's thought about to bring the management of those ships back to the city where the management actually belongs? And is there any thought being given to making the service more economical and user-friendly by calling in at Hastings on the other side the ditch, and just generally making it more economical and more efficient service for the region. Thank you.
So I guess a question regarding TT line.
Thank you. Thanks, George. Of course, that'll be a TT line decision. As you may well know, that the state government has been working in regards to changing the focus of the TT line to make it a little bit more friendlier for passengers and the cost of getting across Bass Strait. Hastings, of course, is one of the largest deep-sea ports in Australia, and the Victorian government has been working on that, throwing, I think, $2.3 billion off the top of my head into developing that port. And I think that talking to Minister Hinning, that the Tasmanian government is looking at having that link into Hastings and making that about a 5.5 hour crossing, which is more efficient, and it certainly gets our tourists back into Devonport, and actually in a period of time that probably makes it a bit more attractive to come over and spend a few dollars on this side of the river, or in Devonport itself, and also the region.
Questions? One down the front here. Just while we're getting to Kevin, Matthew, I'll ask one that certainly come to us via various platforms, but the whole figure of 250 million, people seem to get stuck on that a bit and say, how the hell are they going to shake $250 million out of the pockets of ratepayers? So can you explain how that figure is come about?
Yeah, thanks. It's certainly one that Council hears, that how are we going to afford $250 million, but it's we're not planning to. I guess that's the short answer. It's a strategy to encourage that development into Devonport, and Devonport's contribution, or Council's contribution, is only a very small part of that. And over 200 million of it is private investment. So it's about making the environment right and facilitating that private investment so it comes, and it's certainly not a council project that the council are going to save up and fund.
Kevin Matthews from Cameron's Accountants. My question is directed either to Matthew or Yvonne. Is there going to be any opportunity for a small investor to invest in this project on a direct basis, or is it more directed towards the larger investor, perhaps to give the locals a bit more ownership of the project?
So establishing a community fund?
Something along those lines.
Thanks, Kevin. At this stage, it is subject to commercial developers coming in and deciding how, I guess, it's going to be funded. There's plenty of potential for funding to come from smaller areas to build up into a larger amount to actually then make something happen. So if you're talking about whether it's a big W or a target sort of area, you might be talking about a $20 million spend to get something like that up and running. How is that funded? Well, you may get one person come in and actually fund it, or you may find that there's groups that sit behind that sort of flow the funds through to actually accommodate that. So there's not one answer. It'll be project by project basis. The retail part is one area. You've then got the other developments that happen down in the business precinct as well. So there'll be obviously different parts that go on down there, even in relation to magistrates' courts and things like that. How that is ultimately funded as well is something that state government will give some thought to along the way. And again, is it a lease sort of arrangement back as distinct from them owning it into the future, and how's that done will all depend on the commercial reality of it.
Look, that's an interesting question, Kevin, and I think it's a good question. And an observation that I made earlier on, what normally happens in these cases, and Deloitte has done this in the past, and I think it's common with pretty much all councils, that they'll sit down, work out a plan as to what they might like to do, have a little bit of a vision, and ask for expressions of interest. And hope that there's going to be this wonderful great developer, Harvey Norman's going to come down from along and spend mega dollars and build that. But reality is when that doesn't very often happen. You see lots of pictures on the front pages of the newspaper. Not too many of them quite ever get to be real. And I think the reason they don't happen is because that if they're looking for that developer to come along, the developer's looking at what's good for them. They don't really care too much about what's good for your region. It's more about what works for them. And this is really one of the fundamental things I think it's important you understand how the council have gone about this. They have retained ownership of this. They have kept the ownership. That's where they've committed to invest their money to get it to this point, so that they are owning this whole thing and taking it right through to a point where it is real, and then they can look at taking certain bits of it and offering it out there to an investor to get involved. And I think at that point in time, that then allows creative people in our community to get together, little syndicates or whatever, to be a part of that, because all of that upfront stuff's been done. And it's really then just a matter of getting on and getting the finance and making it happen. And that's a really important point, I think, about the fundamental difference of how this has been approached. And at the end of all of that, I think an important thing to understand is too, that a developer is always looking to make a dollar out of it, obviously. And if council have kept a hold of this and owned this, then at the end of the day, I think that they are sharing in that dollar, and that's going back to the ratepayers, going back to the community. So that's a really important point.
So you can see, Kevin, with your millions of dollars that you've got squirreled away, there'll be opportunity in the future for you.
I think we've seen community funds work for various institutions like universities and different organisations. I think it's a great suggestion, Kevin. I think we might have a question up the back there, Yvonne.
David Porter, Smith. Two very quick questions. First to the Mayor. The Council looking at maybe keeping one of the wharves from the marina in hoping to reintroduce the spiritual key, the Devonport East Devonport service, and secondly for one of the Living City members, with the hotel, how much would the bit of the waterfront will be taken for the guests of the hotels and not for the public?
Okay, so the first question about the ferry to the Mayor.
Thanks, David. There is a group working through the Mersey ferry at the moment, the Torquay, and the opportunities that present itself and trying to look at a business plan. There's a lot of issues surrounding the Mersey ferry. We've got the ownership of the pontoons, Crown Land Services, the pontoons. But as you see in the plan, you have that marina there. We could have a nice little triangular operation there. So, but at this stage, we're still working through to try and gain a business plan for the retention of the Mersey ferry. And that's all I can say to you at the moment in regards to that. The second question?
Yeah, with the second one, certainly the principle is very much trying to open up the heart of the city, the river, and there's a balance, I guess, between putting the development in that space and some of that restaurant development, hotel development. I guess the master plan as it sits now, and I must bear in mind it is only a master plan, but it shows the hotel sort of running parallel to Best Street, not actually starting until about where the newsagents is. So you could actually, as the master plan sits at the moment, at the end of the mall where the National Australia Bank is, we should be able to see right through and up the river. So the intention is that the Harris Scarf building would go and the Tyre Centre and open up that precinct, if you like. So from the end of the mall, there'll be views directly towards the river, and the actual hotel development will sit further back down towards and run parallel to Best and across in front of McDonald's and cantilever out over the rail on the road.
Thanks, Matthew. Can I just ask a supplementary question to Kate and probably to Paul about the social impacts here of something like this plan? What do you think are the major fors and against in relation to the implementation of this in the social fabric of this community?
I might put away with this. For us particularly, and coming from that community viewpoint, it's jobs. It's a massive issue for us, and we come up against it every day, so that's a big plus for us, that there will be some jobs created and ongoing jobs, which is what we need in this area. The other positive that I can come out straight away is having particularly the link and the library in the centre of the development. I think that's a very positive step to encouraging education, literacy, and making it real for people that may not go to libraries and use internet and other things that they may not have at home, that they can access it there and very easily, right opposite the bus service. So that was a very big positive for us. Negatives? I'll leave that to Paul.
Paul, I guess if you can talk about the economic opportunities that something like this brings. I mean, we talk about manufacturing has probably passed us in terms of at least major manufacturing. Niche manufacturing certainly is still alive and well on the northwest coast. So there's plenty of business opportunities here, and I think my wife and I have got dibs on that little ice cream shop next to the lighthouse. So we'll put that in early.
Thanks, Julian. Yeah, obviously there's been a lot of downturn as far as industry and those sort of things are concerned with Devonport. I'm relatively new to Devonport, obviously I've only been here about 8 months, but this plan gives us that opportunity to actually move forward with some certainty and actually create a way forward for Devonport. And it's a really positive opportunity that we've got, and being able to create, and I think the Mayor mentioned upwards of 1,100 ongoing jobs in the longer term, and obviously it's not going to happen overnight, but obviously once we start and we can get some construction going, there's construction jobs, and then obviously the long-term jobs and all, and the opportunities there are very important for this community. From a council perspective, And I've had the same questions asked of me in relation to where's council going to get all the money from to be able to fund all this. And it's been explained that it's not about council funding, but as we create new wealth within the community, then obviously that will assist council in being able to then respond to some of those other things that the community always wants the council to provide, and the social side of things of providing the social infrastructure. And the waterfront precinct will be a major part of that as well. And it's about being able to link to the river, but also the community to have access to the river, but also back into the CBD area.
Well, my question is probably to the Mayor. We, in the past, have had problems in Devonport with vehicles arriving on the ferry and heading east or west rather than coming to Devonport. What provision has been made in the plan for motorhomes and cars with caravans? And also, with the council chamber being buried in the middle of all this, what about tradies who have got trailers on wanting to visit the council chambers? What parking facilities will they have?
So a two-part question there, I guess. One about the heavy or the tourism vehicles coming into town, and also, I guess, in relation to the council being in the centre.
That's all. In regards to tourists and their camper vans coming off and the caravans coming off the Spirit and the parking, already council provides a limited amount of parking in Train Street, the one just opposite Roundhouse Park. There's some parking there, and of course when we start building the Living City, that will be a component of our parking strategy to provide areas for those vehicles to be able to easily park in that downtown scenario. In regards to the tradies, the same thing will apply. We have a 900 car park multi-level system coming into play with the Living City. So that's all part of it again, and that's also come through as part of the community consultation process. So it's all in the mix. It's about now working on the detail. The hard part is now. What you've got is a very nice picture up there in a master plan, but it comes down to Tintax now where we can put everything.
And that's a really important point, and I might ask you to add to that, Matthew, because one of the points of feedback that we've had is that the council's forgotten the rail. The rail's no longer along the foreshore, but very much this is about a vision and then building the detail how this all works, isn't it? It's about how you take this plan now and make it into a reality.
Yeah, certainly, and I guess council encourages people to look at it as a master plan and remember that there is a lot of detail that needs to be worked out about where things go. In particular, you mentioned the rail. If we had a pot of gold, I think everyone would say, well, let's just move the railway line. But I think we've realised that that's perhaps a bit unrealistic at this point in time. And so sort of thought, well, how can we work that in? And council's very much of the view that we should do what we possibly can to get the Don Rail back on the line, and how great that could be if the Don Rail came around and stopped right in the middle of the Devonport CBD back on the main line. So there's all those sorts of things that need to be worked through. But there's a long way to go with the detail.
I think we just had a volunteer to drive the first train round. Another question up the back.
Hello, my name is David Martin, and I'd like to congratulate the council and the committee members on the foresight to see that we needed a plan to take Devonport into the future. On the plan, there's a lot about culture and arts, and yet I see no provision for culture or the arts, and in particular the Arts Gallery. So I'd just like to know what plan, if any, you have to integrate that into the plan that you have.
Yeah, good question. And Yvonne, there's a couple of questions down the front here too. But who would like to ask?
Well, firstly, art and culture is significant to the Living City and to Devonport itself. When you start talking about tourists, when you go and yourself visit other places in the world, one of the major things that you go and see or experience is the art and the culture. And for this Leading City to work, it has to be a significant part of that. Again, it's in the detail. The walkway is called the Art Walkway. The link that will be in the new Civic building. Part of that we're looking hopefully to have part of the art and culture on display and freely accessible by the public for that as well. But again, as this comes out, more detail is developed on the master plan. Certainly art and culture will be a major part of it.
Yep. Question? Yep.
First of all, I'd like to congratulate everybody on retaining some of the heritage buildings in the plan. I was quite impressed by that. So the art gallery, I guess, would be classified as a heritage building. That's still in the plan. Is that still left intact next to the video shop? And the next question is parking. So you've got a 900 parking space multi-storey car park, and I guess there'll be on-street parking as well. In relation to how many parking spaces you have today, are you increasing the number of parking spaces in this future plan? Accessibility is another thing as well. That's a big consideration because we're an ageing population, lots of disabilities in our community. I'd like to know about how you figured in accessibility.
So 2 parts thinking about the art gallery and also parking and accessibility. And Paul's going to personally guarantee there's going to be no more parking meter attendance. So first of all, we'll address the art gallery again. The art gallery is still planned where it is.
Yeah, with the art gallery, council hasn't made any decisions on it, where that might end up or whether it might move at all. There was a study done recently by the gallery that identified some opportunities or suggested that it may be better for the gallery to be part of a new waterfront type precinct. But as to whether, I guess that's part of what council need to work through now, whether the gallery in its current location is the best place for it, or whether it should be in one of those buildings within the waterfront precinct. So still some work to do on that. With the car parking, yeah, look, a lot more capacity. Certainly, replacing some of those developments will be in existing car parks, so there'll be a role there to replace what's been lost there, but then add to that capacity, and that's a must for those retailers that are coming. They insist that extra car parking is there, and as you saw on the plan, there's the multi-storey car park, but then also in the southern part of town, council understands that where the magistrate court's proposed, that some of the existing car parking will need to be replaced in the southern part of town also.
Question accessibility of people in the town?
Obviously, with any of the plans, they'll have to meet all the requirements for accessibility, DDS standards and those sort of things. So that'll all be covered in the detail as we move forward with the planning phase.
I think we have a question from one of our younger members in the community.
Hi, my name is Sharif Syed Rohan. I'd firstly like to commend the DCC on this magnificent plan, but however I do have a question in regards to East Devonport and what will be happening over there in terms of redevelopment, as I think it would be a bit strange for people coming into the Mersey River to see a world-class Devonport on the west and something different on the east. So I do hope there is something to hold on the east in the future.
For those East Devonport residents, of which I'm one amongst, who would like to answer that? You've got that.
I guess it's the same with other destinations in the city too. I have a similar question from people in Four Ways and other parts of the city, I guess, outside the CBD. And I guess the answer there is, I guess we believe a strong CBD will actually help those areas. If the CBD is in decline, well, then those other areas will suffer also. And if we can grow the city as a attractive destination, people spend longer when they come here, and there's those flow-on effects that more people use the spirits of Tasmania and obviously come through East Devonport and so I guess we said there's a connection. A strong CBD is good for the other parts of the city. That's not saying that council is still committed to those other parts, and we'll still continue to do things there when that's necessary. And there's obviously been some money invested in East in the last 5 to 8 years, and they'll continue to be so.
And Sharifa, it is about making a CBD strong. As Tony McCall, the University of Tasmania lecturer, often says, if you have a strong heart, well then the multiplier effect out in your hubs and spoke areas will regenerate and reinforce those areas. And in regards to getting people here, the whole thing about Living City is not only based around creating 1,100 jobs, but it's also about creating that wanting to come to Devonport, basing yourself at Devonport, and then experiencing the whole region. We need to get them here first. To get them here first, we need to have something for them to come to. And one of the major things that's commonly known in the tourist industry, the first thing that tourists look for is food and wine experiences. And by creating this, and shopping of course for you ladies, by creating this, it has something. Men don't shop. It will create something that when people are looking to come to Tasmania, they'll be able to have a look at Devonport because it offers something more than what it has done in the last 30 years. And once we start getting that critical mass in the CBD, it will then flow out.
I'll have you know men do shop.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, Bob Valentine. I noticed that the link was at one stage put down near the bottom end of town, and now you've moved it up to there. But I just wonder, and one of my concerns is this age of recycling and utilising what we've got. But I dare say one of the best buildings with landscaping and everything else, and most utilised building in Devonport, appears to be on the demolition, going to be up for demolition and moved down yonder. Now I know that when the state government hands that over, as according to your plan now, it'll be moved down there. How are we going to have a clear indication and a guarantee that what's going to be replacing that lovely building up there that's so utilised will have the same amount of area, have the same facilities, and also the same accessibility? That does concern me. I think it's a retrograde step to have a building such as that couldn't have been incorporated in the overall plan.
So Bob, I think you're referring to the library, not the courthouse. I'll just clarify that. And I think, Paul, would you like to answer that in discussions with Link about why it's ended up where it has?
Certainly the Link are very keen to maintain its presence within the main part of the CBD area, and that building itself is required for the expansion plans that we have, and so therefore yes, that building will be demolished, and obviously what replaces it, you've seen a broad idea of what might be there, and certainly we'll be very careful about that into the future. Certainly the actual Link building as part of the city building will meet the requirements of the Link, and they certainly will be making sure that we meet those requirements, and we're already having some discussions with the Link, both at the local level and also at the state level, to make sure that whatever we replace it with will meet all of the requirements, not just for what happens now within the library services, but the future, because the Link programs and the way that they go about delivering their services is always changing and always enhancing, and they will make sure that we allow for that as part of this plan.
Okay, I'll get you to add to that too, because you mentioned the library and you talked to those involved with the university, and it's very important for them and for the communities they recognise to actually be right in the heart of communities and talking to people about education. Hence we're seeing a lot more university accommodation buildings appear in CBDs. But it's really important to involve the community or community learning institutions right in the heart of town.
I think from what I've heard, particularly in talking with anyone from Link and others, technology is changing so quickly, and it has changed since that building was built for a purpose even 25 years ago. I believe it's probably even maybe about that age. And there's a need for lots of different things now as well, a lot more computer access, and I'd say that the building would probably be much better designed and purpose-built for now rather than 25 years ago, because it has changed drastically.
I think the proposed building does involve a convention centre too, doesn't it, Matthew? Which is something that the town's screamed out for I don't know how long.
That's right. There's a plan to extend the existing convention centre across into that multi-purpose building. I'll just pick up on the building demolition too, is what we're talking about it. I guess going back 3 or 4 years, the reason that site was actually identified, there was most people probably remember there was interest from Woolworths to build a marketplace development up at Don Road, and that involved a Big W and a Woolworths supermarket and about 20 specialty stores and car parking. And that was one of the early triggers, I guess, that council started to ask the question, well, how could we get that development into the CBD? And to do that, we needed around 3 to 4 hectares in area. And so you start thinking, where's 3 to 4 hectares in the CBD of Devonport? And it sort of led to that conclusion that that area where you would have identified is probably the only place that it's reasonable to do that. And unfortunately, that involves a couple of buildings that need to be demolished and relocated. But it's probably the only realistic site in the CBD where you can get that sort of area to bring a development of that scale into the heart of the city. And obviously the other attraction was to place it between the 2 retail areas at the moment, so between the Coles Kmart Centre and the mall, to try and eliminate that fragmentation.
Thanks, Matthew. And of course, on the conference facility, not convention centre, it's a conference facility we've been screaming out for. Yes.
Yes, Jim Ritchie, long-term resident of Devonport, now long-term pensioner, I hope. I'm just thinking it's a wonderful plan, and I congratulate everyone involved. But is it build it and they'll come? Because I think Devonport requires another 20,000 people to keep this going on for years into the future. It just seems that all these new ideas and new retail complexes, etc., needs population to service it. And what are the thoughts about that? And just one, excuse me, little detail. I notice on the plan that there's a marina plan for down where the old Muscle Rock used to be. Now, I understood back in the day that the Muscle Rock got canned and had to go because of the commercial shipping up and down the river, causing a bit of wave movement and was damaging the smaller fishing boats, etc. there. I was just wondering about that. I know that's a bit of detail.
Yep. So 2 questions there. Paul, I might get you to ask the first one. I mean, the council has already been talking to major retailers, and I think one of the things I think we can say about major retailers, they don't do anything unless the numbers stack up, first and foremost. So is it build it, they will come? Have you got retailer interest and developer interest?
Certainly there is retailer interest and there is developer interest, and the studies that have been undertaken demonstrates that Devonport can certainly deal with additional floor space for the type of retail we're talking about, the large department type store. Your point about population increase, any sort of population increase will obviously help to sustain the future of the Devonport area, but we're also talking about the broader region, that you've got the Latrobe's and the Central Coast and the outlying areas where people actually are moving to, and Shearwater is an example where the population out there has increased significantly over the last few years. It's about actually also providing the opportunities for those people to be able to have an area where they can shop and come and visit restaurants and all the other bits and pieces that go with it.
The other aspect is when council's had some studies done as well, Devonport loses a lot of its spend, goes out, and I'm not sure whether Matthew's got the exact numbers, but something like 30 or 40% or something along those lines actually goes outside of Devonport. So part of this is about trying to provide the facilities and the shopping that people will actually stop and spend here. So at the moment they're going somewhere else to spend that money, whether it's Bunnings in Burnie or wherever it might be, some other small boutique type area up in Launceston. It is about trying to capture that and keeping the spend here. It's about trying to capture those coming off the ship, making sure that they've only got to spend 1 or 2 extra days along the northwest coast, and it can have a significant financial impact for the community locally. So it's a number of things. It's not just one. It's a broad range of areas that are trying to get the capture rate in.
And just touching on that leakage, when people are going through to Launceston and spending their dollar there, Launceston's benefiting by creating that employment down there. Stopping the leakage and offering that opportunity here in Devonport offers the opportunity to employ local people from our area. We suffer from 10.16% unemployment, which was the December 13 figures, and lately I think the figures have come out about youth figures, about 21% unemployment. So it's about creating that opportunity to create that employment and to stop the leakage. We also have 360,000 people that come off the Spirits into East Devonport. We have around about 150 to 160,000 people that come into Devonport via our airport. So that's 500,000 people. Just imagine if you've got 10% of that, as Yvonne said, comes in, heads west, spends the money in our region, in Devonport, what type of employment that will create. And we're saying if we do this right, we get all the details right, it'll create 1,100 ongoing jobs.
Matthew, did you want to add on that, but also address the Muscle Rock question?
Yeah, in regard to the Muscle Rock, Council's met with Tasports on that and met with one of the senior engineers there, and we've also met with the Harbour Master, Charles Black, and spoke about how we might do it, and there wasn't any showstoppers, I guess, identified, so we obviously need to keep working through that, but at this point everything's okay.
Yes, hi, Nick Coates. Just to follow on Matthew's comment earlier about the cantilever with the hotel, what's the feedback from the public, and just about the look of it, and just secondly, to follow on from Jim earlier too, with the comment about the private funding with over 8%, if that's what you're looking for, what risk analysis was put into if that doesn't happen, because the reality is that's a lot of floor space we need to be looking at filling.
It sounds like another Matthew Atkins hot potato to me.
Yeah, I guess with the hotel and that waterfront space, Council always see that that's the last part of the plan. So the start will be the retail precinct and the southern precinct, try and get some of those areas happening, and then ultimately Harris Scarf would move back into that retail mix. So we've got to bear in mind that anything in that waterfront precinct is 5 years away. So there's going to be a lot of plans and a lot of design and a lot of ideas and a lot of developers come and go between now and then to work through what that finally looks like. But I think, Council's, the feedback we've received so far has been generally positive around that hotel and the proposal. I think that the principle behind it is it's trying to change the game so Devonport can get its share of visitors. And the Tourism Council of Tasmania, I saw the other day, they've got a target by 2020. They want to increase visitors to the state from 1 million to 1.5 million. And if you look at the growth in tourism in Tasmania in the last 2 years, that's quite achievable. There's been significant increase, but the sad thing is it's all been around Hobart and in the south of the state. So this is Living City is about saying, well, what do we need to do in the northwest to get our share of that? If they can achieve that target of increasing visitor numbers by 500,000, how do we get them to the northwest, and what do we need to do to be ready? And that's where good food and good accommodation comes into it, and that's obviously the connection with that hotel.
Now, Paul, I'll have you know the next question comes from one of the great Collingwood supporters of this community. And it's officially, the heavy roller's out, it's officially cricket season, isn't it?
Thanks, Julian. I'm still a bit flat because when you said there was a younger person asking a question, I had my hand up. I thought it was me. But anyway, we'll go on to the question. This is for you, Paul. 2 questions. First one will be fairly short, I imagine. Is there pipe music in the project? Secondly, I know the time of entitlement's over, so I've been told, in terms of government funding. How are we going to attract that state and federal government funding with budgets being extremely tight?
Your first question in relation to the council's decision in relation to providing what is essentially a public address system in the mall area. Council made some decisions in relation to that. Subsequent to that, they have now determined that we are going to trial some Wi-Fi in the mall over this summer. And as part of that, the funding to do that will come from that allocation we put aside for some mall improvements. And then once that's done, we will then go back to council and discuss further what other improvements that we'll actually then provide within the mall. The other question in relation to government funding, yes. The opportunity for government funding comes and goes. I've been in local government longer than I wanted to say, probably about 25, 30 years, and there has been times when there's been lots of government funding around, there's been times when there's very little government funding. It's very competitive, the government funding. The regional assistance for local communities, there's going to be a significant amount of money that's going to be allocated by the federal government in subsequent budgets. The first lot of that is the 15-16 financial year, and we will be doing all we can to actually make sure that this project is in front of the people who make those decisions, that this is a community that deserves to get some funding to assist it in following through on the plans that it's got. Most of these type of grant applications are requiring you to demonstrate that you've actually done the planning. Well, the planning is actually happening. It's about actually being able to say, we're actually shovel ready, we can go with this. And so I think that there will certainly be federal government funding into the future, and we're only 2 years away from the next federal election, and we'll obviously need to make the most of those opportunities as they arise as well.
Jared, I'd also say Premier was here at the official launch, and he stated for the record clearly, and we've quoted him on it, that they are committed to it. So there's no doubt that there's a state government commitment, and there's currently a couple of bureaucrats in Hobart scratching their head, working out how they're going to be able to do it, but the Premier's definitely committed.
Andrew Meldrum. Just to commend the Council on the vision that you've had, I think it's fantastic. Has there been any thought, as what you told us earlier on, that we're going to be a bit rickety in about 20 years, has there been any thought about rolling out an education program through the school? So our kids, the kids that are 16, 17, 18, are invested in this project. So they take on board and they carry it through.
Thanks, Andrew. One of the things that we've got in mind over the next 2 to 3 weeks is to actually get into the schools which is one of the things I'll be actually doing. It's taking that type of program to show the SRCs in each of the schools, so they're part of it. They've actually also, we've had a youth survey in regards to the city, and also the public consultation period where we were out there and amongst the public, even up at Sheffield, being there, answering questions for young people, and even tonight saying this is a community consultation. That's why Sharif is here.
There was when Council did the North Principals Plan in March last year, there was a specific survey that Council did for young people, in addition to the general community survey, and that was sent around the schools, and there was some good feedback through that.
Dave Snowden, congratulations on the vision we have for the living city. I think it was Matthew that might have said, a man without a vision will perish. And the Mayor actually said, build it and they will come. So they both had quite a biblical moment there. My question is, we see the numbers of people coming on the Spirit and also to the airport. But what I've observed over the years is that people come off the Spirit and then do a direct left-hand turn to Launceston or a right-hand turn to Burnie, and the Bass Highway actually acts as a bypass of the CBD. So I was wondering, what plan has Council got to maybe educate the people on the Spirit and even the people coming into the airport that we do and will have such a vibrant CBD, and they should make it their first port of call before they continue on anywhere else?
Thank you. Just in relation to part of that is we understand that happens now, so we're very conscious of that. And part of the thinking when this was being done was, what can we actually do to capture people's attention as they're coming in on the Spirit? And I'm not sure if you saw, but part of the big thing that was on here was that walkway that sort of goes out and around the sort of the frontage of the river. It was trying to identify something that would actually people could look at and say, yep, that looks interesting. Yes, there's something over there that we want to go and see. So it's a matter of trying to have something that is clearly visible for those that are coming in on the ship, so that they can see something that might catch their eye and therefore they might come over. In addition to the visibility of it, it's also then about promoting things like the marketplace that's there as well, and certainly having fresh produce, whether it's the tuna produce, whether it's the vegetables, whether it's the berries, whatever it might be, having that available for people to actually take back on the ship, because you'd be aware that whilst people can't bring a lot of that produce into Tassie, they can certainly take it out with them. So there's certainly a lot of capacity there, but it is about promoting it and getting it out there and getting it known. Some of it's got to be visual, some of it will be through other means as it goes forward as well.
We've got time for a couple more questions. Katrina will lock the door on us if we overstay our welcome too much, but a few more questions.
Patrick Johnson. Well, first of all, I'd like to congratulate the visionaries for seeing Devonport as best place to take advantage of northwest tourism. It's got huge potential as long as we commit to supporting sustainable tourism in the region. My question is about, and I also support the concept of inner city living, and that's a great thing to be having vision. I was just wondering if the council is engaged on the community of people already living in the inner city. A group of people that's often swept away in new developments. That's the transient homeless. What is in the plan for those people in Devon?
Well, Patrick, thanks very much for your question. Homelessness is very close to my heart and the work that I've been doing with young people over the years. I suppose for me, the first thing that we're creating is the opportunity for having 1,100 jobs created. And that gives an opportunity for those who may be homeless, may be struggling, that may have to consider moving out of the area, being transit. But unless we realise our full potential, unless we get out there and start creating, and in that creating our reputation to attract people off the spirits, people off the out of the airport to come and base themselves in Devonport, to stop the leakage going through to Launceston, we need to be able to create those 1,100 jobs. And there's an opportunity for those who are struggling, are in need, and as I said, it's an opportunity, and that's what we've got to look at, and that's what Living City is about.
I guess, Royce, that inner city living, the incorporation of the ability for people to live within this city is probably something that we haven't quite tapped into in the past. Would that be a fair comment?
Yeah, I certainly Devonport, I think, is really only at the beginning of that, and this is something that will encourage that. I think you'll see all sorts of opportunities that will come as a part of this. It will encourage a lot more people to look at opportunities to develop residential accommodation that's close to that city area. So I think that's a really important point. Look, the other thing I think you need to be really mindful of with this is, and you've seen the pictures there tonight, the vision that they're creating, and this is something that is quite unique. This is something that's when it's finished, it's going to be really striking. It is something that I think is going to be an attraction. There are a lot of other things that have got to be added into it. There's been lots of things talked about tonight, the art side of it, those sorts of things, and I look at what's happened in Hobart over the last maybe 3-4 years with Mona down there, and I think if you went back 5-6 years, no one would ever have predicted the impact that has had in bringing people into Hobart and the impact it's had on generating accommodation in that and the businesses that operate in that city. Now Devonport can do that. There's no question about that. We can do that. We need to have that vision. We need to be able to stick to those sorts of things and look at what we can do to create that. And that food side of it, I think, is really important. That's something really great that we've got here. It's not going away. It's only going to get bigger and better. There's I think one of the important things that I keep talking, encouraging council on as well too. This is great, but it is just the beginning. This is a wonderful picture, and it's got, I think, a hell of a lot of credibility. It can happen. It can be real. It will happen. But it's certainly still going to need an awful lot of commitment by council, by the community to make it real and to stick to it. But there's another part to that as well too, and I think council has a really important role in this, and it's been talked about a little bit tonight. We do have to increase our population. We do have to get more people into this part of the world. Yeah, it's no good of building all these great big shops and thinking they'll be fine. They're only going to prosper if we've got more and more people coming in here and they've all got jobs. And that rural community that we've got around us, I think, represents our best opportunity by a mile. And I think it's an important thing that council needs to not lose sight of, that they have a role in being able to attract people to come here and establish businesses and create employment. Outside of just shops, you've got to create somewhere where, well, Costas is a great example, I think, of what they're doing here, but there's a lot of those sorts of ones that we've got to look at, we've got to get here. But that can happen, and I think that's where council needs to put its vision into the future as well.
Thank you, Royce. Lucky last question.
Hi, Andrew Lightheart Apps. I've been a local resident for about 24 years, grew up in Brisbane. There's a couple of things, I don't know quite how to frame them in questions. One is the sorts of large infrastructure development visions. We've had a number of iterations of them. invariably the stumbling block has been the $5, $10, $50 million that developers and council and state government fundings have to outlay. We're talking here about an overall figure of $250 million to realise a whole lot of what that's all about. If it's not going to fall over because of those big figures, I'm just wondering at which point you bring in the staging, the business plans and the staging of the smaller scales that developers and council and funding can realise, so that it's not just hodgepodge. That they're capable of standing on their own legs. The smaller stages that you build towards this bigger picture. Right, so that's one question. How do you stage that so it doesn't just go because of the big numbers that you're talking about? And the other is more in the area of community culture and community building through sporting and arts and educational culture. It's kind of mentioned there, but I'm aware that an awful lot of that can be done without a $250 million city development. So I'm wondering how you acknowledge that and embrace that, regardless of how soon that gets up.
Yeah, all right, good questions. I think it only fit in too that we finish one of those questions as a Matthew Atkins hot potato question. Just in terms of the staging of the project, Matthew, and when do you first turn us on?
Yes, I guess some of the earlier versions of the plans and the thinking that council had, it was very integrated and it was all reliant on doing this to do this to do this. And over the last 12 to 18 months, I guess that's evolved, and we believe the plan's now getting to a point where we can get a start on a number of fronts. So we've got the multi-purpose building and the relocation of the Magistrates Court. Those things can start now, and then that allows the retail to happen, and the southern business precinct can grow when the demand's there, and all of that's there to go independent of the waterfront precinct. So there's been an intentional move to make clear stages, I guess, that we can get a start on. Then there's that challenge of getting the federal funding for the last part, and the ask there is 25 million, and we've talked about that tonight already. But I might just put that in context, the Macquarie Point development in Hobart on the railway site, that recently got $50 million from the federal government. And I guess we argue that this has a similar impact, or will have a similar impact for the Northwest as Macquarie Point will for Hobart. So that brings a bit of reality to that number.
In relation to the cultural education, what's happening outside of this?
In regards to the learning part of it, Council actually tonight voted unanimously to create a learning community specialty work group to change the attitudes of our community towards education, how we value education, how we can utilise that as a cornerstone to help build community capacity and involve the whole community in learning projects, etc. There's a whole vast amount of information and reports on becoming a learning community, but it really involves education as a cornerstone. And part of that comes in with having a link in the middle of the civic building to make sure that we've got public access, easy public access to be able to get in and out of that. So that's one step the council has taken. It's taken it tonight, and it's about involving people. It's the part of the living city itself will become a learning community.
I take it that's a scoop, Mayor. We've heard it here first. Thank you very much. And I guess as a Devonport resident, but someone who works for a regional news organisation, it was tremendous to sit here during the opening and look back up at the crowd and see the mayors of various regions, general managers from other regions on the northwest coast. And that really reinforced to me, and I think it did the Premier as well, that this is very much a regional project. While Devonport's at the heart of it, it's definitely a regional project. Look, I do want to thank a couple of people. First and foremost, I want to thank Katrina Elliott from CMAX, who allowed us to do this at very short notice. And I think when you see that film on the big screen, you understand why we were particularly keen to have it at this venue, and how lucky are we to have this venue. Before I thank the last lot of people, I also want to encourage you, if you do have any further questions or comments, there is a council website, livingcitydevonport.com. I'll get in trouble if I get that one wrong. It's there for you to go to, ask further questions, get further feedback, so I encourage you to all go to that if you still have further questions that I apologise we haven't got to this evening. The last lot of people I want to thank, and certainly the Devonport Council representatives here, but also the Independent Community Task Force members. They do this out of voluntarily wanting to commit to their time to this project. And again, I know Royce had to change some travel plans to be here this evening, so we thank you all for the time that you're donated on behalf of this community. So please thank our panel. There was a little businessman known as Henry Ford, and he said, "Coming together is a beginning, keeping together is progress, working together is success." As you leave here this evening, remember that word vision. When you walk out of the cinema tonight, have a look around, see where you might go and have a meal and what you might do, and then imagine it under this vision with the restaurant strip and the city cafe and that great big leap walkway. And I encourage you to use that vision as you leave here this evening. Thank you so much for giving us your time on a Monday evening.
Yeah, obviously, yeah.
Okay. Might have crossed paths on the future. Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's just too fast. Got me out there.
Sign on it.
Just
Council's got this mentioned tonight. There's a 4-week consultation period, so this was launched last week. We're trying to get as many people to provide feedback between now and the 5th of September. So there's been a number of people that have put in one-line comments, but there's been others that have given us 3-page submissions and said, because of this, you should do this, or this. So yeah, certainly, that's some ideas on how you can improve. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I know there's been a lot of different proposals over the years.
Yeah. I guess this one, before public, we always had this sort of draft that was being refined and we put out the principles. We started the market on the background and it's continued to change. Someone's had different stakeholders have said, well, we want different things, so we've had so it's already gone through a lot of that before it's actually released to the public.
Yeah. I mean, you got to have something to get.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, I think you need to give them time.
Yeah, it's like anything, clients, you kind of going to give them clients, or even the work with some people, and with a kick here and stuff there.
That's right, yeah. You're not with TCS then?
No, let me go.
Okay.
All the folks that are doing it. Yeah, designing as well. Okay, it's not ready today.
Okay. Yeah, do that.
No, there's only one. Andrew Smith. Friday enough.